Hey guys, this is Jonathan McCormack, Attachment Specialist. I want to talk to you today about why therapy doesn't work. I went to therapy when I was younger, and I always wanted to ask, what are we doing here? Where is this going? How is this supposed to get me well? If you ask a therapist that, I bet you they'll give you this answer. They'll probably tell you something like, as you speak to me, I'm going to notice things. I'm going to be able to reflect back to you. And you're going to understand these patterns. And you'll be able to see these patterns. And by seeing them, you'll be able to change. Plus support. That's good. You're going to become more aware. Perhaps you've had a therapist tell you this. I love this. If you say like, well, I'm really not changing. They go, but at least you notice, at least you're aware of these patterns. You're aware now. Well, indeed. But if you went to school for 5-6 years and your theory is that the more aware one becomes, the easier it will be to change, I would love to see these studies, okay? Because I have friends that are very ill and suffer. They're some of the most aware people that I've ever met. If you talk to them, they'll say, hey, how was it talking to the boss? Well, I had this thought, then it triggered this, and then I felt this way, and then I was thinking, and then here's where my mind went. Well, they're very, very aware. That does not help them emotionally regulate, though. So the other way a therapist can help is just being an attachment figure to you. There's something to be said by having someone you see regularly, you look forward to, they treat you well, they care. And it's healing, being understood. It is healing to have someone there who understands you, being seen and known. I wouldn't denigrate that. I would question whether you had to go to school for 5-6 years to learn that. And there are certain people that are just healing presences. That's wonderful. But the change is awfully slow. It seems to me like basically they're trying to come up with a competing way to be. Okay, so you've been thinking a certain way, behaving a certain way, feeling a certain way, and as laid down in your brain, you have a neurological groove there, and then they want you to notice that, and they want you to start thinking and feeling and behaving differently. A competing groove, right? So as you keep practicing this and trying that, this in theory will get stronger and this will get weaker. But the problem is that it takes many years, took years and years and years to get that way, so it'll take years and years and years to get this way. And as you're trying, this one will still get activated. Hopefully it'll get weaker, but it's competing against each other. And that's what a therapist does. That's pretty inefficient. I was just talking to Dr. John O'Connelly from Rapid Resolution Therapy. I mean, listen, the guy trained and he was a psychotherapist, a doctor. He tells me, all his years as a therapist, he did nothing. He didn't help people. He got really good with all those degrees, taking tests. Yeah, he got great at taking tests. That's wonderful. And therapists love their big master degrees. Very impressive. But John O'Connelly, he does ask people, and I've seen him do this. There's 3 psychologists in her training group, and he asks, so how many hours did you, watch your teacher get people well? Of course, they said 0. Well, how many hours did your teacher actually watch you? 0. Okay. Because when people want to play basketball, they have a coach who watches them do it, and they practice it. Yeah, that happens. But for some reason in therapy, that just doesn't happen, So what does help? Okay, this is how people get better. Real change happens. You have that original pathway. This is the way you're being. Well, instead of making competing one, you can simply rewrite this one on top of it. That's called memory reconsolidation. Some people call it coherence therapy. That's not a specific modality. You can do it a lot of different ways, okay? So, for instance, I do the ideal parent figure protocol. That's one thing I do, parts work. And so with that, the ideal parent protocol, you have an internal working model of how you relate to people. That's laid down the first 18 months of life. And it changes a little bit, but not that much, you know. So by imagining ideal parents, you can start creating a new internal working model. This is a new map of how you relate to people, and that works very well. Okay. Once you've done that, then you could start giving and correcting the experiences that cause that behavior. So think about it. You have a memory, right? And this memory of mom, I don't know, ignoring you, right? Or something like that. So your mother, you're trying to get attention, and you are not seen, you're not known, you're not delighted in, you do not feel safe. That's terrible. This memory is what you're reacting to. Even today, even years and years later, that's still being triggered. So what you can do is you can find that original memory. You do have to find the original memory. And you can reconsolidate it. You can give the memory, trigger the emotion, and then give the brain a different expectation. It expects when you need to be seen, you will not be seen. That's what it learned. That's what it expects. And that's one of the prime places it learned that. But if you can get there and you imagine it, you trigger it, and then you give a different experience. Now imagine the parents are loving you and you see this, you say that. I know it's imagination, but the imagination hijacks right into your nervous system. Think about it. You're in a movie theater, completely safe, it's dark, you're with your friends, and yet your heart is beating out of your chest in a horror movie. You're sweating. I've seen people cry in tears from their imagination. It does affect our nervous system. So you can give the brain a new expectation, right? And if you do that 2 or 3 times, it works. What you're actually doing is you're activating the original memory, right? It has to be the original memory. And then you have about 5 or 6 hours to lay down a new learning experience for it. It ought to be repeated 2 or 3 times. Now, you don't have to do it the ideal parent protocol. There's a lot of ways to do it, you know, and effective therapy will do it. But that's what you're doing. Here is why you're mentally ill. Your brain is stuck in the past. Your brain still thinks that you're 8 years old and your mother's ignoring you. You're still reacting to that. So what you have to do is you have to give the brain a new expectation and bring it to the present. The brain has to know you don't have to react to that anymore. That's over. In neuroscience, we would say you want to take something from the short-term memory, because that's still happening, this memory, short-term, and you want to move it to the long-term memory. That's over. You no longer have to react to that. It doesn't matter. You know, think of like a Vietnam vet. A firecracker goes off and he flips out. He remembers gunfire. That's still in his short-term memory. That's what his brain's still expecting. So what does he have to do about it? Nothing. Nothing. He's no longer in Vietnam. Nothing. The brain doesn't have to do anything. Okay? The brain just has to know it's past. It's in the past. Nothing needs to be done. But he doesn't know that. The brain doesn't know that. The brain, the unconscious, only understands present. The unconscious always lives in the present. So, no expectation, live in the present. There's a bunch of different ways to do that. I mean, you could do it with parts work. I do parts work, you know. So say I'm talking to a therapist, you know, or you're talking to me. Say someone's talking to me and goes, I saw my mother the other day and just, boy, she triggered me. I would say, whoa. Yeah, get in contact with that feeling. Where does it live? Let's feel that. Is that familiar? When's the first time you felt that way? And maybe you'd remember, when I was like 8 years old. Okay, close your eyes. Let's go back to when you're 8. What's happening? And then we could bring that 8-year-old, we could heal it, give it a good experience, and then we could bring it into the present, you know. And there's a bunch of ways to do this. I mean, you could go even like, okay, take that 8-year-old and show them your life. That 8-year-old still thinks, that 8-year-old doesn't know that you're an adult and you can deal with things now and you don't have to react that way. This is really just a way of using the imagination, the way of taking different units, in neurological units, and representing them with imaginary figures. That's just one way to do it. There's plenty of ways, but the fact is that's what you have to do. You have to update the brain. You have to update your mind. That's how real change works. And That's they don't teach that in college. Listen, if you go to college, you learn a little bit about CBT, a little about DBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, a little bit about that. But new modalities, like internal family systems, rapid resolution, what I do, attachment work, you're not going to learn any of that stuff. You could, like me, spend thousands of dollars on your own dime and all this time to do it, but who's going to do that? You really can't blame therapists for not doing that. It's a lot of work. But I mean, that's what works. So I just want to let you guys know that's my take. That's where I'm coming from, and the science backs it. That's why you're not getting better. That's why you've had 100 years of psychotherapy, and we're still screwed up. The brain doesn't work that way. So anyone is interested, please leave comments. Let me get your take, and I'll certainly respond. Thank you very much, Jonathan McCormick.